Mark Selby, how are you doing, sir?
Excellent, sir. Good to see you once again.
Fantastic. It's week number 17. We've been smashing out the nickel news, taking a romp through the macro world of nickel, which has been fun recently, hasn't it? But I think this week's going to be a little bit quiet for some reason.
Yeah, you don't get a Tesla battery day every week, so I think with that subsiding, the news around nickel cobalt has quieted down a little bit. The other big factor, and this happened, is across all the metals right now, is this is one of the weeks of the year that the Chinese actually take some holidays. So the first week of October and then Chinese New Year, which is a lunar holiday which moves around, are the two 1 week periods where China does really slow things down. So from a sort of a trading perspective, drivers out of China, you're not going to see much happen during this 1 week period, and that's definitely been the case this week.
It's China National Golden Week. Is that the name?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. It's October 1st is the anniversary of the founding of the Republic, and then they kind of stretched it out into a 1 week holiday a way back, just to make sure that people actually did get a little bit of downtime. Back in the early 2000s. So 2000s,
great. Well, look, you're going to step into. So we're not going to talk about nickel today. We're going to talk about cobalt. I mean, you're a stand-in.
A little bit of both.
You're a stand-in for me, actually, Mark. I need you to know that. Okay, I couldn't get a hold of Anthony Maluski, so you're just going to have to fill in if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, he's I guess probably counting all the cash that he made from selling his Gigametal shares a few weeks ago. So.
Yeah, he did do that. You see, if I did that, I would definitely be keeping my head down. But I see him just all over Twitter, just smashing it out of the park with commentary about the market. So apparently he's fine. He's just fine.
Yeah.
You can't say anything.
Yeah.
You shouldn't say anything.
No. But again, as a general rule for investors, when management teams are selling and when management teams are buying, that's usually a pretty good sign of where things are headed. So then I won't say any more than that.
I think that's true. It's actually, I've got myself into a bit of trouble this week, actually. I put out a report for a company called Nova Resources. They're a gold project, Western Australia. Quite a big company, like 650 market cap. Yeah, that's a big company, right?
Yeah.
But we were questioning some of the numbers and questioning some of the valuations. One of the things we're questioning is, why several of the large shareholders of the past few years have been selling down their position if it's such a good story, right? So you're right. It's not new. This thought isn't new. If management's selling, there's a reason. If they think it's going to the moon and they're selling, it's not going to the moon. So if they tell you it's going to the moon, and they're selling, it's not going to the moon. But yeah, like I've kind of bashed Gigametals a lot in the past couple of weeks, and I think deservedly so. They seem to come back down to roughly where they were, which perhaps is reasonable. But I think a lot of people lost a lot of money along the way, and I don't think that's fair. In fact, sorry to do a lot of the talking. No one's here to listen to me, but I've got one last thing to say on this. We were speaking to a guy called Howard Klein yesterday. He's a sort of lithium market advisor. He represents a number of companies like Piedmont. He just did a deal with Tesla. He said to us, and here's another telling sign, if companies are telling you that they are talking to Tesla, they're not talking to Tesla about anything meaningful, because the first rule of Tesla Club is don't talk about Tesla Club. You do not talk about the deal. That's what he said, and that's quite telling.
Yeah, I know that to be the case from past lives. So yes, very, very much so.
Right, there you go. There's a few clues, just straight up out of the bat, giving you some clues. But like I said, you're going to talk to us a little bit about Cobalt, because there's been they took a bit of a bashing with Tesla saying we're going to try and remove Cobalt from some of the batteries, right? So people are a bit nervous about Cobalt as a result. But it's been an interesting week, very interesting week. We've seen Jervois make an acquisition. What did you make of that?
Yeah, the great thing is, the Jervois team, I think, is probably the best management team in the junior nickel cobalt space. The chair is a guy named Peter Johnston, who ran Western Mining, was the big Australian nickel sulfide producer, and he had held senior roles with that company up until it got taken over by BHP Billiton. Then he went on to work with Xstrata and then Glencore. Basically, he turned around their Murrin operation, which was one of the earlier wave of HPAL projects that didn't work out so well. But Peter and his team got that asset up running. It was never low cost, but Glencore bought it for pennies on the dollar, and has generated a pretty decent return from that asset. And then today the team's led by Bryce Crocker, who again is ex-Xstrata and one of the smarter guys in this space, and they've got an excellent operator in the guys of Michael Rodriguez, who was part of that team that helped turn around Murrin. So in terms of people who know how to advance a project, through and actually get it operating, that's about as good as a team that's about as good as it gets. So they're advancing a project that had been sort of held by a junior for quite a long period of time. Installed. It's in Idaho. In the U.S., it's adjacent to a past producing mine that operated back, I think, in the 70s and 80s. And so, today there isn't any primary cobalt being mined in the U.S. today. So obviously, being a relatively strategic metal, it should be well received by cobalt consumers in the U.S. And so they've done two big things kind of in the past month. So one was update their feasibility study. That should allow them to complete the financing they need to get everything into production. One risk there is the feasibility study was done at $25 a pound versus today's current price of $15. So again, for cobalt bulls, it's going to be a great investment. If you're a little less cautious or a little more cautious on the cobalt price, then you'll need to look at the numbers yourselves and figure out what's there. Again, one thing, I would encourage investors to do is always look at the price that's utilized to come up with their return figures. At the end of the day, you can put pretty much any price you want in your feasibility study as long as you have a basis for that, putting that number in the book. So sometimes it's higher than the current price. Or most often it's higher than the current price. Sometimes it's in line with the current price, and extremely rarely is it below the current price. Just be very, very cognizant. And they have to, they generally provide sensitivities to what their returns are at a price. So again, just encourage investors, to take a look at that when they're looking at things. The other part of the announcement, which came through today, again, cobalt. And the benefit of having cobalt in the United States is, being a local supplier. If you then have to ship it to China to get processed and bring back to the United States, that doesn't make you, as much of a local supplier. So, the good thing is they secured a nickel cobalt refinery that's operated for several decades. It just closed down about 5 years ago. It's been on care and maintenance. It was owned by a company called Votorantim, which is a large conglomerate in Brazil. And so, this will allow them to process not only the cobalt from this project, but they also have a nickel cobalt asset in Australia. And any HPAL project will be producing, an intermediate product that this refinery would be able to process. So I thought it was a very clever move picking up that asset. It gives them one of the few processing plants that's available in the Americas. And so, I think, that will really help them, generate some decent returns from, not only having the product processed, but then be able to deliver a pretty high-end product to the market.
It's interesting timing. They're in the States. I think that's a massive plus for them. I think that they had a few, false starts, as it were, in Africa, and then, Australia first, then Africa, trying to get those things off the ground. I think Idaho was the big moment for them, and this looks like a smart deal. This looks like a really smart deal now, they're actually on tomorrow. Bryce is coming on tomorrow to actually tell us all about it. He seemed quite excited that he needed to speak to me this week, and because I think he's actually in Brazil currently. So we're going to hear hot off the press. The other bit of good news is the Trump put out an executive order around critical minerals. And cobalt's on it. Nickel wasn't, by the way, just so you know. Okay, just saying. Nickel wasn't.
Yeah.
But cobalt is. So for Jervois, with an American asset, this seems like good news. It may be just political posturing and arm waving. You know, I imagine there's quite a few executive orders going around pre the election in 33 days. But it all helps, right? It all helps.
Yeah. Oh no, I can actually tell you sort of firsthand that the U.S. government is taking mineral security much more seriously. Again, as a junior exploration company, we were reached out to by the Canadian branch of the U.S. government just to get project introductions and ask again how they can help accelerate the development of resources in this half of the world, which they consider safe, friendly jurisdictions.
Tell me about that.
It is so. It's much more than talk, actually.
Okay, well, tell me about that, because to make introductions is one thing. What we've seen in the uranium space is a whole bunch of talk. We've had Section 232, which the vanadium guys are going through at the moment. That seemed to, I think the denouement of that was very little change. That a nuclear fuel working group off the back of that, again, the denouement of that was very little change. We've seen talk. When politics is involved, it tends to go on. I know eventually, at some point, decisions are made. I'm not criticizing. Politics is there. The politicians are there for a reason, but it doesn't always convert into economic benefit for companies. So when you say this critical minerals focus
initiative.
Well, it's an initiative. Yeah. There's an initiative. There's a lot of conversations going on at the moment with a lot of vested interests, with a lot of lobbyists lobbying on behalf of some of the bigger, more established ones. Critical minerals, and certainly we've been looking at the rare earths component, is difficult because it's such a small industry. So to get noticed amongst all the other things that they've got to do suggests it will take a long time. So for nickel, what does that mean to the US? Why are they trying to have conversations with a Canadian company?
Yeah, so for nickel, if it didn't make the list as a critical mineral specifically, it's still seen as important. Nickel is in jet engines, which are going to jet fighters. Nickel is used in a lot of high-strength alloys. Its initial major use was back in the early 1900s when they figured out it made much stronger armor. So it has always had a sort of military component, which has then been dwarfed by other uses. So, and nickel is what happened, why Inco and Falconbridge did not end up getting merged was antitrust issues over Inco's and Falconbridge's dominance of a very small market segment that produced the nickel that was used in the highest end alloys. So, it is on, big time on government's radar and has been for a long time. In terms of your earlier question around, sort of how concrete is it versus talking, I was extremely pleasantly surprised by it's okay, do you need us to help you make introductions to major U.S. consumers, to get you in at the right level there? U.S. Exim Bank, all of the major global economies have an export-import bank that helps facilitate financing and project development of anything, not just mining projects. And so, again, we will we'll set you up with the right people in Exim Bank to make sure that you can have those discussions and get a sense of what kind of financing packages might be available. So no, I've had a chance to work with the Canadian government in certain foreign jurisdictions, and they've been extremely helpful in terms of helping open doors. And again, the U.S. government has obviously made this a mandate of their offshore groups to do, and they are taking it very seriously.
Okay, I want to break that down because I think this is such an important topic for companies, and it's really important for the people listening to this and watching this to understand, because I've done a lot of this government. So there's a real process to go through, because no one in government wants to make a mistake, and mistakes are made if things are rushed. Okay, if people aren't checked out, companies don't prove themselves, if
Yeah.
the macro environment changes. There's lots of ways that people can screw up, and you don't do that in government. It's, civil servant mentality here. So if them saying to you, hey, we can introduce you to a bunch of guys over here, fabulous. There's no obligation on any of those guys to do anything. I kind of liken this to, you meet as a young kid, you meet the CEO of a company, he goes, hey, you should come work for us. And you expect to kind of go in and have meetings about strategies, and you're going to hand it down to way down the organization, and you got to start at the bottom.
Yeah.
You're talking to the guy in my day, which would have been photocopying reports, which is what I did for one summer, thinking I made the big time for free, by the way. And it's the same with government. You kind of got to work your way through it. But I tell you what, if you do that, you hit pay dirt. You can hit pay dirt big time, because the budgets are massive. And once you're in, you're in. But the hoops you got to jump through are significant. So is this, I know we're talking nickel generally, but just I'm interested in the conversations you're having. Is this a big focus for you, or people like you? Is it really important to you?
Yeah, no, I think for me, personally, I'm not going to have any trouble selling my nickel anywhere. It is very helpful on two fronts. One is, and I would say in terms of, when do governments are really sort of focused on it, is, there's two things. I will get in trouble if I screw it up. And then the other part is, okay, governments create all kinds of stuff, and these poor people need to figure out, okay, what of all the noise, what are the 6 things that I'm going to get asked about in my year-end review as to whether I did anything on that front or not? And what was clear to me is, minerals, access to minerals in friendly jurisdictions, not Chinese or Chinese influenced, is a significant initiative. And then the other part too, I think, is interesting, is there's very few things in the U.S. that are bipartisan, that you've got support from both the Democrats and the Republicans are, and these minerals initiatives have been supported by both sides, which again allows, people who are in the lower levels that might have different political leanings, it's something where everyone in their office can get behind. So, yes, they are taking it very seriously. Coming back to, okay, how is it helpful? One, introduction to large consumers at the right level. When your national government says, we'd like you to meet, this person, and they can generally get a hold of the person at the right level and get you into that meeting, which saves you some of those maybe initial steps that you might have to do to work your way up the ladder. And again, too, the other second piece of it that's important is around the financing. Exim Bank, again, looks at a bunch of different things. If they know, and it's been very clearly told, this is a priority initiative, then that just helps make that process go faster, right? Which is, from a mining project perspective, the faster you can get through some of these things that sometimes take a long time, you can shave many months off of your process to have the right person, be the one who knocks and opens the door for you.
Okay, but what's the difference between private and public here? Okay, because you said, I'm not going to have any problem selling my nickel. It's not going to be a problem. Yeah. And I suspect there's a lot of companies outside of the US in that position once they get into production. Yeah. No problem. There's a big world of commerce out there, well-established trading patterns and buyers, etc. You don't need to be talking to the US government. So that's on the private side. There's, the company's going to make money wherever you sell it. On the public side, like government, they're saying these are critical minerals. They're critical to the success of the United States, right?
Yeah.
We need them in here for industry, for defense, for all the different applications of whichever minerals they're talking about. How does this United States help guarantee that the companies, the Ministry of Defense, guarantee that income? I mean, the actual minerals. It's not about making money. It's about, I want to secure the minerals, the ability to make stuff. I mean, what's their role in that, making that happen? Introduction is one thing, but making it happen. Minerals got to come in here.
So the way that happens is, that Exim Bank financing is tied to the fact that it ultimately needs to be processed or consumed by a U.S. consumer. And then you get this, the government funded offtake financing is relatively low cost. And in your overall bank financing package, these end up being very large anchor pieces of the financing. So you get the carrot of the financing, and then again you need that offtake signed up with a U.S. consumer or processor, and so that's how they get the product to the U.S. They need to get the U.S. consumer and processor lined up before they can lend you the money. So it's in their interest to be able to get the deal closed, to make sure you start talking to the U.S. consumer process as early as possible in that process.
Right. But so I'm sorry to keep digging away at this, because it's like Exim Bank, what pressure are they under by the U.S. government to ensure that the conditions precedent on you are clear? Because they're there to make money, right? But the U.S. government is saying, no, we need these minerals to come into country or remain in country. We're not going to let you finance these guys under any other terms, any other conditions. I mean,
what it comes down to, in a bureaucratic organization where you get bombarded with 400 things to be asked to do, and you really have to say, okay, these are the 10 things I'm going to do this year. So an Exim Bank, would be very similar. So, they are asked to fund a huge range of different types of projects, and they would, have money that they would look to allocate to different types of projects. If it's very clear from on high, we want you to do mining projects. We want you get these done as quickly as possible. So if you can get it done in 6 months, or maybe get it done in 18 months, we would really like it that you get these things done in a 6-month period, closer to 6 months rather than closer to 18 months. And so, when those types of directions come from on high, then again, governments, when they're told not to go quickly, they're pretty good at not going quickly. But when you get a bureaucratic organization that has gotten some clear directives on a few things, it's amazing to watch, that organization then deliver against that. So, that to me is the exciting part of it. Is, it's very clear that they're saying minerals are important. Minerals need to be fast tracked, and minerals need to make sure they get all the capital they need, to do whatever we can to bring whatever quantity of these minerals to the United States from, again, friendly countries.
At whatever cost. I guess there's a bit I'm saying, like, how do they define
they're not going to do,
so
they won't do, they're not going to do stupid projects. I mean, at the end of the day, there's still a lending case there, but again, with a project like with ours, which I think is a good project and will go forward, knowing that someone like an Exim Bank might actually get there 6 months faster than they otherwise would, just using it as an example, is very helpful, because it helps, make the broader big bank financing option a much more sort of palatable option than sort of maybe more costly, faster options in terms of putting a project financing package together.
Okay. I just want to come back and kind of stick with Cobalt for a bit, if you don't mind. Okay, we talked about Jervois. You obviously know the team. We hadn't discussed this before you got on the call, right? So we just happen to both know them reasonably well. I get what they're building up, and we'll hear more about it tomorrow. But if I compare them, say, to something, because the world of Cobalt's had a very tricky PR issue for years. Okay, it's got the whole DRC thing going on there, child labor, and all sorts of negative connotations with Cobalt. And obviously Tesla saying we're going to use less of it on some of our batteries, or none of it on some of our batteries. You've got different ways of coming at this. As a CEO or board of a commodities company, you've got several ways at building your products, right? You can be pure play miner. We've seen a company last year, and sorry to make this the Anthony Maluski show, but which is a bit, is Cobalt 27. Now, that was constructed, it was structured, right? That's what I mean. The difference is, like, it's not a conventional miner per se. It was structured in a way which was unusual to give you exposure to cobalt and a bit of nickel in different ways, right? That didn't work out so well. mainly due to the price of cobalt, going through a tough period there. But how does something like a Cobalt 27? What are the lessons to be learned from a Cobalt 27 versus a conventional mining operation?
Yeah. So, one is you need to look, always at what the underlying asset is. So, Cobalt 27 was initially constructed as a sort of royalty and stream vehicle, and I thought was an excellent idea because there was, essentially very few ways to get access to cobalt assets. Again, the asset that Jervois has, was part of was an asset owned by a junior that had struggled for a couple decades. So it wasn't something that was an easy, way for people who wanted cobalt exposure to get cobalt exposure. So, it was a nice new product as we're going to give you pure play cobalt exposure. And again, trying to come at it from the, sort of the higher end of the revenue stream in terms of royalties and streams. And that's how they bought the first acquisition was a royalty on Dumont, which is nickel cobalt. They did a few other royalty deals. Then they did the massive Voisey's Bay stream, which was highly competitive. You had 3 or 4, and they actually shared the royalty with Wheaton Precious Metals. And so, but at the end of the day, you need to look at what the value of the underlying asset is. So, that deal was done at a peak in the cobalt market, and it was done at $35 cobalt. So if you were a believer in long-term $35 cobalt, then yep, that that whole deal made sense. And so, if you're a $15 cobalt long-term believer, then that was a pretty expensive deal. Now, the tricky part for those guys was, and again, I was in the early days on their advisory panel around nickel issues, and there weren't that many cobalt streams to have. So if you wanted to be the leading cobalt, go-to play, there was certain assets. And again, when cobalt was running, again, I've been through cycles. You've got investors telling you need to go do more. And so that's kind of where Cobalt 27 was headed. Where Jervois is going. And again, I would really, they tick the box on so many different levels here and I think they're a great example of, you were going through the strategic minerals list earlier that the U.S. said are all strategic, and some of them are some pretty obscure parts of the periodic table. But again, they create these really unique opportunities where, okay, the U.S. has said it needs it, and there's only 1 or 2 mines of this that exist in the United States. So, the cobalt asset that these guys have picked up is one of those. So, tick box. 2, it's a past producer. So, there's no, we need to invent a new process, as a junior mining company that has never done this before. Trust us, it'll work the first time. Again, we've seen various things blow up in the lithium space. This is a past producing asset. They know how to mine it. They know how to process it. There's no worries on that point. Check. The third check is, okay, are these management that are going to be building a mine for the very first time in their lives, or have they done this multiple times, right? So with Peter Johnson and Bryce Crocker and Michael Rodriguez, you've got 3 people who have done this multiple times at different scales. So, again, a big check mark on in that box. So, again, for other companies that are looking at different kinds of minerals, in the U.S. that are on that list, if you can put that package together, and there aren't many companies that have, but if you can find those companies that do tick all those boxes, then that's a great long-term investment. Because if the U.S. is worried about the supply, prices may not be where they are. Prices aren't where they need to be, but the U.S. will find a way to make sure that thing gets into operation and does what it needs to do to secure the supply of that mineral.
That's fantastic. I like that breakdown. Are you a shareholder?
No, I'm not. No, the
Wow.
problem is they've done too good a job, and I think they've got a pretty good valuation. So
right. Okay. Well, that's important.
Yeah.
Do you think they're fully valued at the moment, or you think there's some upside?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked at it in a lot of detail, but it's a pretty good. I mean, I think it's pretty well valued right now. But again, I think it's reflecting the fact that there's very few ways. It reflects what I just went through in terms of, it really does tick a lot of boxes. And then if you want exposure to Cobalt, it's one of the very few good plays out there, that you as a shareholder can put your money in and feel comfortable that it's, you're going to get a return on it 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So,
wow. If you haven't done much work on it, like you say, I wouldn't like to see it when you do a lot of work. That's a lot of knowledge, sir. A lot of knowledge. Hey, well, look, I know it's been a quiet week. China National Golden Week is quieting things down for us. So I appreciate you stepping in for Anthony today. I'm joking. He was never going to come on. And running us through Cobalt. Great knowledge. Very helpful for my interview with them tomorrow, I have to say. So thank you. Saved me a lot of work. Yeah. I will. He's a good guy. Brilliant. Well, Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Nearly the weekend. You looking forward to it, or are you still a lot of work to do?
It's going to be pretty busy. We're head down and getting the resource update out here in the next few weeks. So that'll be very, very good news. And then, I'll be watching coming out of the week here. I mean, again, these weeks in China, things do really slow down, but the ore prices have stayed very high. Stainless prices have come down a little bit, but NPI prices are still holding up pretty nicely. So not expecting, again, when we talk this next week, it should be still relatively quiet, but coming out of that, the rainy season in Philippines is underway. So we'll see what kind of fireworks start to come through the rest of October in terms of ore availability in China, which will ultimately drive through to where nickel prices are headed next. So
beautiful. Okay, well, something which we are going to try out, I think, this weekend. It's called Rob's Happy Hour. Mm-hmm. It already sounds good, right? Rob's Happy Hour, where a few people are going to kind of get online, have a beer, a wine, whatever tickles your fancy, and have some chats. We might introduce you to one of those coming up. Maybe people can ask you directly their thoughts in a private environment, and perhaps you can open up and share with them some of your experience. Does that sound good? That
sounds excellent. So we're kind of doing it Graham Norton style, as opposed to those talk shows where one's got a glass of wine with them through the entire show. So I'm not sure everyone in the world knows Graham Norton, but it's a slightly more fun environment with which to have chats. It's not quite, what do they call? I've seen those before, at the bar with sort of things. Hopefully it's a bit more fun than that. A little bit less synthetic. And we get some real questions, real people, and they get to share with you some of your knowledge. So if you're up for that, we'll set it up. No, I think it sounds like a great idea. So I'm in.
You're in. You're all in. Good lad. Okay. Well, we'll let you go. Thank you so much again. Fantastic to have you on the show. We love it. There's lots of positive feedback always. Have yourself a good rest of the week.
You too, sir. Take care.